Over 63 episodes from 2015 to 2022. Just this week, Better Call Saul rocked our socks. Let's just look at the pressure that Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould, who worked on Breaking Bad, but also really shepherded Better Call Saul to what it became. A lot of pressure in going back to that well, and I think they did so perfectly. And hey, borrowing a page from my employer, Salt and Smokes Tom, it's Dan Buffa in the Buff, episode 8, recapping that glorious episode of Better Call Saul and trying to figure out where to look at the camera, look at the screen where I can look at myself and be like, hey, good looking guy. Or I can try to look at this little bitty white light. Hello, hello, occasionally. But look, Breaking Bad, whether you got into it, loved its ending, loved what Walter White became and what he did to Jesse and pretty much Hank and everybody on the show, you could have just left it, but they didn't, and they had this idea about expanding upon the character of Saul Goodman, played by Bob Odenkirk, who used to be kind of a comedy guy, wrote for the Daily Show, made his kind of big killing in his career playing Saul. It's all good, man. But and then now today he is an action star as well with Nobody. And really, if there's a rock on this show, and we'll get to Rhea Seahorn or Rhea. If I'm saying it wrong, Kim Wexler, don't come give me that look. Anybody who's watched Better Call Saul knows that ponytailed look of fierce, intense focus. But Odenkirk, you could say those two are really the rock, the heart, and the soul in the show. But it's also you'd be underscoring the effect of Nacho Varga. And what is not Vergara, not the actress's brother, but Michael Mando playing that role, and Michael McKean and Jonathan Banks, Walter, Mike Trout, and Giancarlo Esposito's Gus Fring, and Tony Dalton's Lalo Salamanca, and it just goes on and on and on. What Better Call Saul did, in addition to taking that pressure of going back to the well with another story, kind of a spinoff. This is maybe one of the best spinoffs of all time. And there's been a lot of attempts. Other creators go back to the world and they kind of come away with satisfactory events or results, or they just kind of go and they kind of sucks. But you have three entities where Breaking Bad, and then Better Call Saul, and then El Camino, you can revisit that in 10 years and I don't think they'll lose any steam. And it's also built off the foundation of actors that weren't stars before this project came along. Bryan Cranston was known for Malcolm in the Middle, and then he plays this chemistry teacher who becomes a drug kingpin, the worst of them all, Heisenberg. It's just chemistry, Jesse. But and then you see Aaron Paul, you all these actors, Banks, who really before this was kind of a character actor, meaning the kind of guy who could just play a variety of personalities, but you would never really know his name. I don't think you knew his name until he played that character. And the list goes on and on. I may not have, cared for the actress that played Skylar, but she was great. And Raymond Cruz, even early on, even an actor like that. It took a lot of actors that you would know by their face but not their name, and it took them and made them into names, so to speak. And so getting back to Better Call Saul, it starts out with this story of Jimmy McGill, who was the upstart but still slipping Jimmy McGill, who eventually becomes Saul Goodman. And every season, all 6 seasons would start. The first episode of each season would start with a black and white setting in a mall, and we would know that as a mall in Nebraska, where Gene Tarkovic, uh, I guess I'm saying that right. Who cares? Gene looks nothing like Jimmy McGill or Saul. He looks like a very sad middle-aged man, and what we come to find out is that that is Odenkirk's character after the events of Breaking Bad when he was relocated by the late Robert Forster's vacuum store guy. So, you see him in all these different levels. You see him as towards the end of the series, we saw more of Saul, the flashy suits, the big words, the big talk, all the personality. And but then we saw in the early days the Jimmy McGill who was just wanting to be, the apple of his brother's eye and get his approval, played by Michael McKean, who played the older and very much more put together lawyer professionally, Chuck, Chuck McGill. And then, that he was one of the cornerstones of the law firm that was HHM with Howard Hamlin, and who would be played by the great Patrick Fabian, who, when you consider his arc and where it ended, it's kind of bittersweet, but you're just glad an actor like that got that chunk of a role. I know Patrick from a great Uber inspired movie, Uber driving inspired movie called Driver X. So if you're ever on Amazon, I'm sure it's there. It has everything. Netflix can claim creative power over Amazon, even still after Amazon Studios output, but Amazon Prime has pretty much every movie ever made. Even the movie that iPie was in, the short comedy that was made here in St. Louis, is probably on there somewhere. Dad Eats Dog. Check it out. Where I learned to love Steely Dan and inhabit my dad's personality. But getting back to that, the whole crutch of the show, A Better Call Saul, shows us this yearning of Jimmy to be like his brother, to be accepted and kind of not his brother's equal, but to be in his brother's shadow in a good way. And he never got that approval. And it's kind of like the story of how Saul of let me it's more like the story of how Jimmy McGill broke bad. That's kind of what the whole series was about. And then we meet Kim Wexler, who was kind of his longtime romantic partner, but also his partner in professionally. Because the crazy thing that this show did in breaking off from Breaking Bad, no pun intended, Vince, is that it kind of presented a new character and it presented her in a way that we thought, okay, Kim Wexler's going to be the moral compass of Jimmy, and she's going to be the one that tells him, don't do this, don't, you shouldn't do this. And, you know, I would say that by the end of the show, by the end of the sixth season, I think we've seen a multifaceted Kim Wexler. We know that when she's with Jimmy, she turns into Slippin' Kim, who likes to pull these little con games and heists with her buddy, and ultimately her lover and her husband, Jimmy McGill. And they played it beautifully. They played it in a way that you saw an outcome where these two would just decide to stop doing con games and just be a couple. And we know that's not true because one of the winking hindsight is 2020 aspects of watching Better Call Saul is knowing what happens to a lot of these characters. We know Gus Fring's ultimate demise. We know, unfortunately, and I hate it so much, Mike Ehrmantraut's demise is again underestimating Walter White. That's all he did. And it's great that we got a little bit of Mike Ehrmantraut contempt or pure hatred for Walter White towards the end of Better Call Saul, where he told Saul, "Don't do business with this guy," because if they hadn't, Saul would still be doing business out of that out of that. I'll be a lawyer for anybody shop in the strip mall. Mike would still be alive. Gus Fring would still be alive because to take a slight detour here, but stay in the Breaking Bad universe, Walter, when you watch Breaking Bad for the second time, you go from kind of being behind Walter and far all of his activities because you used to do that. We did it with Don Draper when he was cheating with everybody and making everybody feel bad and just doing some bad shit. We're like, oh man, we love you, Don. You're cool. You're played by John Hamm and Tony Soprano. And even when on Nurse Jackie, Edie Falco, when she was taking those drugs and doing this and doing that, but she was a nurse. And so we watch these characters act nefariously, and we keep paying attention. But what we saw with Breaking Bad, the second and third time I watched it was like, I hate Walter White. He even in his dealings with Gus Fring, if he just would have kept cooking meth and they would have kept doing business and he didn't have to be so, paranoid and really wanted, but in the end, it was Walter wanting the bigger chunk of the cake. And it was the fact that he told the story, Vince Gilligan, of the chemistry teacher who wasn't just a guy that turned into a drug dealer and kingpin overnight. He always was that guy personified in that last episode where he tells Skyler, no, I did it because I was good at it. And I did it because I liked it. And in the end of Better Call Saul, he also gets that moment. Jimmy McGill slash Saul, played by and Bob Odenkirk, just shreds the role. He shreds this final hour, getting back into the main heart of it is what the hour did with Better Call Saul and wrapping up such a great story and really sending us off into what he would ultimately become. But also, instead of just doing that, it did that in a way, but it also sealed up almost the whole Breaking Bad story. Because in the end of this, the final episode, Saul Gone, it was with Gene in Nebraska, or really Gene in the very, very present. We didn't end it back where he was Jimmy McGill or where he first became Saul Goodman. We didn't end it in the Breaking Bad universe. We ended it in the Gene universe where he has been, given a new identity. And now he's going to need another one, but he chooses not to. And I thought one of the great parts of the finale was that he accepted who he was because for so long and really Jimmy wanted to be his brother. He wanted to be like his brother. And then when he couldn't be like his brother, he wanted to be a kind of a con man, McGill. And then he kind of became turned into this whole persona because if you ever imagine what happens with Jimmy McGill if he never really gets involved with Mike and Lalo and Nacho and the Salamancas and the Fring operation, he just got entrenched in that. And so when he came out of it in the end, when he was about to get the lightest sentence, because in the very early part of the episode, he's caught. And you knew when Carol Burnett, who kind of puts out one of the best lines probably of any series finale, when Jean is running away from her house after she just, the one thing that he didn't really account for in this last half season of the sixth season is that Gene didn't account for the fact that the Saul Goodman persona was never erased off the universe. So she finds out who this sweet man Gene, who lost his dog and was putting up pictures and kind of conned his way into that family, used her kind of, you know, dull, dim-witted son cab driver to help, and even his other brother to help him with these little jobs. But he forgot along the way that he was still Saul Goodman, and Carol Burnett finds out, and as he's running away, she just kind of almost spiritually tells the cops, "Oh, get him!" And it just they do. It's really frantically directed by Peter Gould, who just kind of he doesn't lead us on to either if he's going to get caught or not. We knew eventually he is, but I liked how they just dispensed with that. I liked how they're thinking, well, you know, let's get to the heart of the episode instead of have half the episode be chasing Jimmy McGill or chasing Gene, who really is a hybrid of Jimmy and Saul around this little, Nebraska town. So they get him, and then he somehow plays the victim of Walter White and against the DA and all the prosecutors, and even they bring back Hank Schrader's wife, Betsy Brandt, plays the shit out of that role. She was one that you didn't. I almost was annoyed by, not in a Skylar level. Skylar White is a whole new annoyance. And I know women go, just because she's a woman. No, because she's just fucking annoying. Get in the van where your husband's a drug kingpin, or get the fuck out and call the cops. Don't be in the middle. And she spent the whole series in the middle. No, Walter. I like the money. No, Walter. But Betsy Brandt gets a little cameo in the finale, and she just, she puts Jimmy McGill or Gene. Again, he's guy's got so many names, but in this case, she puts really until the very part of the finale, he's still called Saul, and she puts him in his place. But even then, and this is where Odenkirk kind of plays that card so well. He's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about Hank Schrader," and then he goes, "Well, in the end, he goes, this is what I was a victim," and he holds that card, and he makes the prosecutors just think enough, and the FBI just think, "Well, man, we put him in a jury in a courtroom, he might just Jimmy his way out of there," and he does. He almost gets him down to a 7-year sentence for everything that he did, racketeering, all the embezzlement and the drug related and the murders, because Hank and his partner Gomez, their deaths are connected to Saul, Jimmy, Gene in a way too. And so, right when he's about ready to almost get off with it, and they go in the courtroom, and he stands up, but Kim's there. And we find out that all this conniving was simply to get Kim to not hate him. Because men, from our perspective, we know what it is when we really love a woman, and we know they once loved us and we want them to love us again, even if it's the last time they see us free. Because by doing this, by just kind of dropping that I was a Walter White victim. No, he says, man, Walter White wouldn't have been Heisenberg without me. It's essentially what he said. And he's true. It's honest. I mean, when they were starting to get in trouble, Saul Goodman kind of got him out of trouble and introduced them to Mike and introduced them further to Gus Fring. And, for everybody involved, good and bad results. Walter White ended up with a few bullets in his stomach, but he kind of made peace with his soul in a way by helping Jesse escape, who now stands as the last man standing in this universe. But, it's just the way that he kind of shed all that. And he said, no, I did all that. Only to do that, only to get Kim back in the courtroom and just said, hey, I did all that. And yeah, I wish, I hadn't, but I did. And he goes from a 7-year sentence to, as they joke later, when Kim uses her non-expired Albuquerque lawyer, I guess, when even if you stop being a lawyer and you put in your notice, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I guess your little verification card that you are a lawyer still exists. So she goes to see. Uh, in the end, he reverts back correctly to Jimmy McGill, and they have a cigarette in that little interrogation visiting room, place they give him, because he goes to the jail where he didn't want to go. Initially, he was going to be sent to a Bernie Madoff type prison where it's cushy, and he even told him Wing D where he wants to stay, because it's like the Goodfellas prison where you got Paul Sorvino slicing garlic and they're making pasta, they're making spaghetti, but he goes to kind of like general population in a very dangerous prison. But on the prison bus, after kind of pouring his heart out in a way to the judge, and then kind of just claiming ownership of all the crimes and making good with Kim and Rhea, if it is Rhea Seahorn, she gives out the perfect half minimal smile when he does that. But on the prison bus, where he's kind of like, okay, I kind of made my bed, now I'm going to sleep in it. They all start saying, man, you're the Saul guy. Better call Saul. And they all start chanting his name. And in a way, it's like, okay, so audiences got both things. They got to see him kind of get what he deserved. And a quick note about that. Other shows didn't and went down this road. So Barry on HBO with powered by Bill Hader. At the end of the third season, this third season that just finished this summer, spoilers, sorry, it's been weeks. He gets caught, after 3 seasons of killing a bunch of bad and then good people, and and Henry Winkler's acting coach helps turn him in. And that's what should have happened, because now that's going to send that show in a whole new direction. Ray Donovan, starring the great Liev Schreiber. And in a way, they did this with the movie, even though it was more like he just, took a bullet wound, may or may not be dead, but yeah, he's maybe in jail too. But they should have put him in jail. And I think that would have made the show, which I loved, even better. I think they should have sent Ray to jail at some point. These guys can't operate even in this fictional world and also fly that low to the ground as realistic characters. So in the end, Better Call Saul, Saul Goodman, James McGill, Gene Tarkovic, they go to jail. And the final shot of the series is Kim in black and white. And I love that they stay with that in the modern and like the current, like the not really the future of Breaking Bad, but the current modern time, the modern part of the timeline, as it just sees her walking back to her car. And you see this shot of Saul, who after that prison bus thing, now he's just he's a hero. He's not really a hero, but he's got a comfy prison life, even in a very dangerous prison, because unlike a cop on the other side of the spectrum from being a cop, which could be dangerous, you put a lot of those guys there. You work with the people that put them there. You have a lawyer who represented the scum, the worst criminal, and gave them a chance and usually got them off in some way, got them lesser years on their charge, got them to pay less, or did this, points off of the license, or just help them. That guy's a hero in jail. They're going to keep that guy alive somehow, where he can get out of jail even though he's 135. In the end, I think they did what was great for the audience and for what needed to happen, and also for the story, because we got to see him go to jail, but it's in his natural habitat because he can run his games there. He can still be Slippin' Jimmy and then the good kind of James, and then a little bit of Saul Goodman, and maybe even a little Gene where he's doesn't get to bake those cinnamon rolls at Cinnabon anymore, where he managed in hiding, but he also gets to bake some damn fine bread for that prison cafeteria. So in in general, or wrapping it up, Better Call Saul ended exactly the way it had to. And it didn't leave us needing more. We are always going to want more with a great show, but I don't think it left us needing more. Should they do a Mike Trout spinoff and just kind of show us maybe the time? Heck, I don't know. You can't really go too much younger because Jonathan Banks is getting older, but I don't know. Maybe show him in his cop years. Maybe show him with his son and make the son role kind of like the more bigger role. And we know the ultimate arc of that role, but that could be great. But other than that, you watch Better Call Saul, you watch Breaking Bad, and you watch El Camino. And then you go out and get some breakfast because you want to have seen daylight in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And that's if you're going. So that's all wrapped up. As television will often do, they'll present it with something else great, like Blackbird or The Bear. Shows that just, okay, here we go. We'll see how long they go. But the rarity of what Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould and the great cast accomplished is that they went to this world three times, once cinematically, twice on TV. Second time, going back to that well again, so risky, but they knocked it out of the park. And I mean a Albert Pujols left center blast, drops the bat, grimaces at the pitcher, and just looks at the fans and go, "This is our house." Better Call Saul over 63 episodes and 7 years. Went back to that well and hit a walk-off majestic home run. If there's more, great. If not, I'm good. And I hope you're good after this 23, 24-minute little Better Call Saul discussion. Subscribe to the channel. I got 36, according to my friend John with Lost Losers Podcast. I have to make 1,000 subscribers before I can make any money. That just makes the road to 1,000 more fun. So tell your friends, tell the people who don't like me. They'll love to watch the video and see how many times I say or or I just like hop over a word, or tell your friends you like me, because this is where it's going to be. Discussion where you can see me in my habitat, in my comfort zone, couple times a week. There's no schedule, there's no timeline. Subscribe. But what you will be getting 24/7 is, articles of the Ramble On newsletter. on Substack, Dose of Buffa for the movie reviews, and an @Buff82 on Twitter for everything else. Until next time, and the Buff is turning its lights out.